FNaF is 9 years old. 9 years of history across 9 games, mainline games, not counting the mostly canon RPG spin-off, a few joke spin-offs, and a new game that's coming out by the end of the year, and so many books. So it's a little hard and daunting to step into the world of FNaF with a new movie, but disclaimer, you probably won't need to know most of the history of FNaF. In fact, it might be better if you don't know the history of FNaF to watch the movie. And if you still want more context, this video is here to give a non-spoiler rundown of elements that might appear from the games, as well as some fun little aspects of the FNaF world that you might want to know or just kind of fun to know that probably won't have any role in the movie. From the looks of things, the movie's going to be pretty focused on FNaF 1, even down to our protagonist's name, Mike Schmidt. The original game in 2014 follows you playing as Mike Schmidt, watching the animatronics on cameras, each with a slight quirk to their movement patterns, as they walk towards you with you closing doors to make sure they can't get into your office to kill you. It's heavily implied in the first game that the animatronics are possessed by 5 kids killed by someone in the 1980s, with the game seeming to be somewhere later on towards the 90s. Each animatronic has their own little patterns and quirks, like Bonnie basically teleports and only sticks to the left hall. Chica just kind of walks like a normal chicken would, and just kind of goes around the building. Freddy is almost a slow-stalking Terminator, hiding in the shadows, always moving towards you, but stopping whenever you're looking at him specifically on the cameras. In contrast to Foxy, who stays in his own little cove and only moves when the cameras aren't on. But when he gets his chance, he will sprint at you full force down the left hall. Beyond this, every single game has you waiting until 6 AM to survive the night. FNaF 2 is a prequel, focusing on a more successful point in Fazbear's history when the company was trying to rebound off the murders that originally happened. It introduces the toy animatronics, who are these kind of glossy, corporate shell versions of the characters meant to make the place look more kid-friendly, including the destroyed, torn-apart Mangle, who is supposed to be the replacement for Foxy. There's also Balloon Boy. We don't know what's up with Balloon Boy. This game also introduces an extremely important character, the Puppet, who I'll expand on later. Unlike the first game, you play as Jeremy Fitzgerald as the Night Guard for this game, wearing a mask to fool the animatronics with their facial recognition software, and you flash Foxy with a light, and winding a music box to keep the puppet at bay. In the games, we eventually learn the very specific identity of the various characters we see in these archaic minigames. There's a main killer named William Afton, also known as Purple Gay! It's also effectively confirmed that the animatronics are possessed by the kids of the original murders. We even learn some of their names, though we don't have any last names for the kid. Fritz possesses Foxy, Gabriel possesses Freddy, Jeremy possesses Bonnie, Susie possesses Chica, and the 5th one. They're a bit of a headache. William has deep ties to the franchise and an extreme love and sort of bias towards this one classic character, a yellow variant of Bonnie called SpringBonnie, who's a special variant animatronic that's able to be worn as a suit and perform on stage. The catch to this gimmick being that the animatronics are prone to a certain failure that can cause the wearer to be killed if the spring locks keeping the endoskeleton parts out of you fail. Mike Schmidt may or may not be an alias of Michael Afton, the son of William, and there's also 2 other kids of William, Elizabeth Afton, who possesses a murder clown in an experiment bunker, and the other kid, this crying little brat. He's just the crying child. We don't have a name for him, and it's been 7 years since FNaF 4 came out. Now, one character who isn't in the trailer that's really important is the Puppet. The Puppet is possessed by William's first ever and completely standalone murderer, Charlie Emily, who is the daughter of William's business partner and the creator of the animatronics, Henry Emily. She's basically the guardian angel of the main 5 dead kids. And speaking of number 5, we have Golden Freddy. This seemingly all-powerful, teleporting, ghost-like, nigh unstoppable character who hates William Afton more than anyone else with a divine, burning passion, has the most ambiguous identity of any character in the series. See, alongside the games, there's a trilogy of 3 novels. In those novels, Golden Freddy is possessed by a kid named Michael Brooks. But the name we're given in the first 6 games, and a bonus activity guide with like puzzles in it that's sort of like a mini ARG, that is heavily associated with Golden Freddy is Cassidy. Another arguable character who could be Golden Freddy is Afton's 3rd kid, the Crying Child. And even more frustratingly, another book series, this time an anthology of 3 short stories each book for a total of 12 books with 36 stories in them, plus each book having an epilogue bonus story. There's another Golden Freddy kid named Andrew, who technically is never directly stated to be Golden Freddy, but has a lot of the traits that should make him Golden Freddy. The issue being that these books are questionably canon and we don't know what stories do and don't connect. First and foremost, above whoever possesses them, they are this weird, anomalous figure capable of strange, mysterious actions that basically no other character seems to possess. Now, it's implied in the games that the reason the animatronics are trying to kill you, the player, is because they don't know the face of their original killer, William Afton, because he killed them in costume. Or it's at least implied he killed them in costume. So they're really just looking for any Freddy Fazbear's employee to kill, hoping that someday they'll eventually get the one. In contrast, in the novels, it seems like William has some sort of way to trick and manipulate the animatronics to do what he wants, or at least get them to attack other people. And in the Fazbear Frights books, they kind of just do whatever. Final game that might be relevant is FNaF 3, which is set 30 years after the closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, during which a horror attraction company tries to piggyback off the legends of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's dark past, creating Fazbear's Fright. The new crew working on the attraction tracks down some leads about an old Freddy's costume that's been abandoned in a back room. This is actually a Springlock suit that someone had died in. This becomes a main attraction, the legendary Springtrap. Beyond Freddy himself, I would argue Springtrap is the second most iconic and important animatronic in the entire series. In FNaF 3, you play as... it's not really stated. It's implied to be either Michael Afton or Henry Emily. SpringBonnie, the original animatronic that Springtrap is stuck and based on, is programmed to go near the sounds of children. So, since our player in FNaF 3 has access to sound bites to, spook guests walking through the building, he's able to trick and lure Springtrap around the building because his animatronic programming forces him to do so. This keeps him at bay for most of the night, though there are hallucinations that cause your cameras and systems to fail, and this gives Springtrap chances to move forward and attack you. Finally, at the end of the game on the 6th night, the player decides to burn the entire place down to try and kill Springtrap. Though it's worth noting this just didn't work. Another character from the games that looks kind of different in this movie, but does seem to have some overlaps with their game counterpart, is Vanessa. Or at least that's who we think this officer in the trailer that approaches Mike is. Vanessa plays a sort of antagonistic role in the latest game, Security Breach, which, unlike every prior one, is a sort of free-roam horror game type beat. It's set kind of after everyone and everything has been killed off and destroyed in the events of FNaF 6, which I might get into later, and the company has pretty much completely resurged into the public zeitgeist, being a giant phenomenon once again. However, of course, as things do with Freddy's, everything goes wrong, and you, the player Gregory, have to escape the Pizzaplex that you're trapped in overnight. However, this Vanessa doesn't seem to be nearly as malevolent as the one in Security Breach, who is kind of openly a villain from the start. Something that might be an outright continuity difference between the two series is that in the movie, Vanessa says the animatronics want to make Abby, Mike's younger sister, like them, which is a behavior never shown by any of the animatronics in the gameverse. And that's pretty much just a summary of things that are probably going to be connected, avoiding specific spoilers of who is what and what goes where, etc. Now, to get into some fun stuff that's probably never going to happen in the movieverse, let's talk about fan favorite Michael Afton a bit more. He's an immortal zombie man! See, Elizabeth, as I stated before, possesses Baby, the clown jester animatronic, who is discreetly meant to kill kids. However, unintentionally kills Elizabeth, William's daughter. So now Baby is possessed by Elizabeth. She's trapped in this bunker that's meant to rent out animatronics to various parties, along with the 3 other animatronics of her group. It's questionable why these ones are possessed and somewhat debated. Some people think that they're the original animatronics repurposed and melted together into new characters, or maybe they just took their own victims or other things. It's hard to say. But they all conspired together to merge themselves into one animatronic to trick Mike to walking into a room with a giant magic ice cream scoop so they can rip out his internal body parts to wear him as a skin suit to trick the cameras so they can leave the building like they're a normal person. And this works. However, the magic ice cream scoop actually is meant to inject Remnant, which is William's scientific attempts to understand the supernatural properties of the various endoskeletons and animatronic parts that are possessed, into various animatronics and things so he can experiment with it and learn more about it. Because Mike was injected with it, it makes him immortal. At least until he's burned into oblivion. That brings us to FNaF 6, also known as Pizzeria Simulator, in which Henry Emily makes a sort of fake Freddy's restaurant that's run by Michael, where they plan and conspire to lure all active animatronics who have escaped or are just running around into a trap so they can be in a locked cage building like FNaF 3, but this time with no escape so they can burn them all on the inside completely, killing everyone including Henry and Michael, along with Springtrap, Baby, and the other fun times, as well as Charlie the puppet.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
If you feel bad for characters like Charlie, Henry, or Mike, keep in mind they've basically been running around doing this all for 50 years collectively throughout the timeline, so this is pretty much a godsend to put them out of their misery. There are two characters that might work their way in there, but I have no idea how they'd pull that off, which are the Shadow animatronics. Look at this one's name. It's fun. We don't know what their deal is. They just kind of appear, sometimes crash your game. They seem to have some connection to the original Missing Kids, but it's unclear what they're doing and why they're doing it. There's also the 5 other kids William kills that never go anywhere or do anything with the plot. They might possess the toy animatronics, but those characters are scrapped by the end of FNaF 2. Now I want to list off a bunch of weird characters that appear throughout the series, just like once or twice appearances, or maybe they appear a few times and it might even be important, but that doesn't make them any less strange. Lolbit, Freddy Frostbear, Traction the Gang, Yendo, Orville the Elephant, Music Man, or Balloon Boy, or JJ, who's a recolored Balloon Boy, and a girl. And then there's Dee Dee, who's a recolored Balloon Boy, and a girl. Or XOR, who's a recolored shadowy Balloon Boy, and a girl. Little Joe, SpringBonnie, Fazgoo, Eleanor, or the all-star, super beloved, fan-favorite character, Zangle! None of these characters really have good explanations to what their deal is. It's kind of a blast how odd the series can get. I think a lot of people try to take it too seriously of like, ugh, it's not the hardcore supernatural stuff like it used to be. Now it's weird sci-fi stuff. But I really don't mind it. I just kind of have fun with it and acknowledge that this is part of the series, and that weirdness is part of the charm of FNaF now. We had a goofy, silly RPG game with buried, hidden lore and shadowy eyes looking at us in the darkness. FNaF is not just spooky corridor. It is this weird mixture and amalgam of storytelling. Got that kind of Kingdom Hearts energy where you can't think of everything in too literal of a term. There's a lot of weird meta ideas that aren't really happening. Putting codes in a wall tile in FNaF 3 to play a secret minigame, which in turn requires a secret series of jumps and movements of glitching around the game to go give a kid birthday cake so they can go have a party in the ghost afterlife with Golden Freddy, ? This isn't the 3rd game, and it gets weirder. If you want one game to play, though, to just give you the experience of Five Nights at Freddy's, I would recommend either just playing the first one, maybe the first 3 games if you're adventurous. FNaF 4 is probably the worst game to pick, I would say, to start or play. It is really hard, its lore is very obtuse. Though, if you have the setup and equipment and can play it in proper VR, FNaF Help Wanted, which is a VR recreation of the first 3 games plus a bunch of other games and moments, is probably the best standalone experience overall. And if you're trying to get into the series' lore, I'd actually recommend to skip the timeline made by Game Theory. Especially since part 4 of the timeline series is pretty heavily contradicted by a lot of the recent material. Part 3 kind of is one of those that could or could not be true and it wouldn't change anything. Part 1 is a lot of MatPat kind of writing in what he thinks could happen to the series past, but it's never really stated or even strongly implied. So kind of only part 2 holds up in that entire series. So if you want a simple, short, one video experience to explain FNaF, at least in a general overview, I'd actually recommend checking out the channel Rytoast for the game-only timeline, which I'll put in the description. FNAF's just a fun ride in general, and if none of this made any sense to you, then congrats! You're halfway there to being a FNaF fan. Purple guy! Bye!